Do you want to have the ability to get to choose your own belief system? I do. But there's a coordinated effort going on right now to take that cognitive liberty away from all of us. Your spiritual beliefs are being hacked, whether you know it or not, by a literal neo-communist religious cult. This cult is the cause of all the woke ideas you see suddenly permeating our culture, and they're working with the United Nations to bring forth a one world religion, theirs, which will be enforced through globalism. The people involved with this cult might surprise you, and ultimately, the amount of power that they have within the sectors that they've infiltrated should concern you, because their religion, Gnostic New Thought, views your individualism as a literal threat to their humanity. Their views on evolution and what it takes to make the next evolutionary leap to a higher species to avoid extinction requires your cooperation, and they plan to get it, either through brainwashing or by force. Let me introduce you to the Evolutionary Leaders.
What I hope to see this afternoon is that we each articulate our vision of a transformed society. We each articulate how we're going to play a role. Then we take that collective data, put out that collective dream, put out our collective intent and our commitment to participation, and then recruit the resources and energies and the consciousness of all in the world who are on that frequency, and we do it through the help of media.
How do you put out your collective vision and intent and recruit others to it, as the founder of the Evolutionary Leaders cult Deepak Chopra says, through the help of media? You get one of the most influential and widely watched people in the media to host your leaders and platform their ideas on their show to thrust these beliefs into society and culture. Who is that person? None other than Oprah Winfrey.
I decided to invite my first guest on the show after getting a phone call from Michael Jackson. He was calling to let me know that I absolutely had to have Dr. Deepak Chopra on the show. We're invoking the power of prayer today. Guiding our prayer mission is one of America's foremost spiritual teachers, I call her. Please welcome Marianne Williamson. Tonight we're talking about my favorite topic on earth, spirituality. Reverend Michael Beckwith is the founder of the Agape International Spiritual Center. His new book is called Spiritual Liberation.
Alanis is scheduled to speak at the Celebrate Your Life conference with her spiritual mentor, Neil Donald Walsh.
Today on Super Soul Sunday, she is the best-selling author who got millions of us thinking about our shadows.
Because these shadow beliefs are really what we believe about ourselves.
I don't even know how to begin to introduce you, because we were going through all the books that you have.
31.
Okay. Umpteen bestsellers,
Right.
including The Power of Intention, which actually is my all-time favorite. Do you know who it is, listeners? It's Dr. Wayne Dyer. And he is here to talk about the Tao. You know, you've been described, there's so many, you're described as a mystic, a philosopher, a historian, a scholar. What words do you use to describe yourself?
I would call myself an evocateur of the possible and a midwife of souls.
Wow.
I know for a fact that there are more evolutionary leaders than that midwife of souls and the others in that video that Oprah's hosted on her show that I just didn't include because there are over 250 of them to look for. But these clips were gleaned by doing just a very quick internet search, and you have to ask yourself why many of these evolutionary leaders, like Gary Zukav alone, have been on her show numerous, as in 35 times. Well, it's simple. Most cults and cult practices are considered strange and sinister, in other words, not normal by outsiders, and because of that, for the most part, they stay on the fringes of society. This cult's beliefs about the world and spirituality and their New Age practices focus on aligning mind, body, and spirit, on the other hand, were normalized in our culture through their constant exposure on Oprah's extremely popular show watched by millions of people who gradually accepted these New Thought cult beliefs as no longer being fringe. This is called the mere exposure effect. Research has found that individuals tend to develop a preference for things based on repeated exposure and familiarity. So what kind of Gnostic New Thought beliefs did Oprah mainstream into society through her show? Well, first let's talk about what New Thought actually is and what they believe, and then I'll show you short clips from Oprah's show so you can see how she platformed these ideas in a very big way. To do this, I'm going to start by playing a short reel from the movie put out by the New Thought religion themselves called What is New Thought?
We are part of a movement called New Thought, which, by the way, no one has heard of.
We're labeling things all the time, and it's funny that we even call this thing New Thought because it's been around forever.
It's all about our thoughts creating our lives and our being one with God. And there's nothing really new about it. It's just a new presentation of an ancient concept.
It's known by other names or no name at all in many countries by many people.
New Thought is not just about sitting and thinking. New Thought is about mind power, it's about heart power, it's about spirituality. It's actually about being one with the divine and raising your thoughts from a human egocentric consciousness, one to a divine consciousness.
And in that expanded awareness is a new intuition, a new insight, a new imagination, new contexts, new meanings, new stories.
There's a whole philosophy, there's a whole point of view. There are saints and sages and mystics and prophets and living masters and Oprahs and Michael Beckwicks and amazing souls on the planet carrying this light, carrying this forward.
So glad you are here with me!
People may not even be recognizing that they're watching something about New Thought.
New Thought may permeate almost everything because it is a chameleon and it's really compatible with almost anything and everything.
As you heard the people in the video say, you may be watching something about New Thought and not even know you are because it is such a chameleon. It shrouds itself in both deceptive Christian language and ideas, which confuses Christians who don't read their Bible into thinking it's just an offshoot of Christianity, and also seemingly universal spiritual truth language, which deceives non-religious people into practicing their religion. In actuality, New Thought is a religion unto itself, that while it has incorporated philosophy and teachings from a variety of origins, goes under many different names, and has a multitude of denominations, it has a very distinct belief system that members from both of these groups, whether they attend their churches or not, have unknowingly converted to. Because of this chameleonness, New Thought is used as a broad term which covers numerous ideologies, all of which are encompassed under an even broader term, metaphysics. But all the ideologies have at least one thing in common. They're all in agreement as to the role that thoughts play in our lives. Specifically, that our thoughts are our lives, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Now, isn't part of the problem of all the suffering in the world, particularly when it comes to disease, is that people think that they are their bodies?
Yes, people think they're physical machines that have learned how to think. In fact, they are a spirit that makes thoughts that has learned how to create the physical machine. And if you really want to heal yourself, then you want to get in touch with that part of yourself that's not time-bound, that's not in the field of change, that's non-changing.
Deepak Chopra says that in order to heal ourselves of disease, because New Thought believes you can do that too with the power of your mind, we'll talk more about that in a minute, that you have to get in touch with your divine self. It's because New Thought believes in something called panentheism, which is a big word to say that they think that God is in all things, that the universe and everything in it is part of a singular divine totality or capital W whole. This means that while New Thought maintains that separation, that we are not necessarily capital G God ourselves, all created beings are seen as divine and having the ability to tap into the mystical power of God.
If we have the three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, we should have been the first ones in line to understand if God created all things,
yes,
there's one God who created all things,
yes,
then everything has to carry the divine DNA, and that God carries forth the God self into those beautiful blades of grass. What else are they except they're all children of God? Now, I know to people who haven't thought that way before, and let me make this distinction for the doubters, they will think it's pantheism. I don't know if you've heard that word before. Means God and all things are equal. We're not pantheists. Authentic Christianity is panentheism. God in all things, not God is all things.
Yes. Well, the first time I read this book called Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukav, which was talking about being a multisensory personality and recognizing that what your five senses could see was just a part of what it meant to be a human being, that there was so much more to what we see beyond what we can see and beneath what we can see, and that all things carry a physical energy and also a metaphysical energy, that which is beyond what we can see or know, and that all substance holds that. That in all things there is a level of consciousness. In all beings there's a level of consciousness or unconsciousness for a lot of beings also. And that carries its own energy, and that there is a vibration to everything, that there is a frequency, a vibration, and energy to everything in existence, and that somehow all of that energy, frequency, vibrational stuff is connected.
The way that we come to that knowledge of our hidden divinity is to train our thoughts through the practice of mindfulness and meditation to increase our conscious awareness of our relation to that divine whole. I could argue that it was the influence of Oprah that brought many of these Eastern practices into the mainstream simply through her continuous promotion of them. Another way that New Thought believes you can tap into this divine consciousness is by living like and following the teachings of Jesus, which is not necessarily bad in itself, but they don't believe in Jesus the way traditional Christians do.
There are millions of ways to be a human being.
Then how do we please God?
And many paths to what you call God. And her path might be something else, and when she gets there, she might call it the light. But her loving and her kindness and her generosity if it brings her to the same point that it brings you, it doesn't matter whether she called it God along the way or not.
And I guess the danger that could be on that, I mean, it sounds great on the onset, but if you really look at both sides,
there couldn't possibly be just one way. What about Jesus? What about Jesus?
Sarah even brings him up in this whole discussion, and you say there isn't only one way. There is one way and only one way, and that is through Jesus.
There couldn't possibly be with the millions of people in the world.
There isn't.
There couldn't possibly be. In this book called Discover the Power Within You by Eric Butterworth, where he talks about the Christ consciousness. And up until then, I thought Jesus came, died on the cross, that Jesus' being here was about his death and dying on the cross, when it really was about him coming to show us how to do it, how to be, to show us the Christ consciousness that he had, and that consciousness abides with all of us.
Yes. In reading books such as Tolley's, it's really opened my eyes up to a new way of thinking, a new form of spirituality that doesn't always align with the teachings of Christianity. So my question is to you, Oprah, how have you reconciled these spiritual teachings with your Christian beliefs?
I've reconciled it because I was able to open my mind about the absolute indescribable hugeness of that which we call God. I took God out of the box because I grew up in the Baptist church, and there were, rules and, belief systems and doctrine. I believe that God is love and that God is in all things. And so that's when the search for something more than doctrine started to stir within me.
Note that although she deceptively calls herself a Christian repeatedly, Oprah doesn't actually believe that Christ died for people's sins, which is a pretty major tenet of that faith. The New Thought religion believes that Jesus was just a spiritual teacher similar to Buddha or others who demonstrated a potential of godliness that we could all attain, not the second person of the Holy Trinity. This and Oprah's assertion that Christ was not the only way to God is pretty standard for Gnostic New Thought, though, because the religion is basically a cobbling together of a bunch of ancient esoteric and mystical Eastern religions that believe there are many paths to achieve the knowledge or gnosis needed to come to this conscious realization of our own divinity, or what Oprah calls Christ consciousness. It's really not hard to see how real Christians who watch Oprah's show are systematically led astray from their beliefs by someone who espouses to be a Christian herself and uses Bible verses and Christian terminology to peddle what's actually the latest version of Eastern mysticism. This idea that you could be a, quote, open-minded Christian and yet believe these things that are so antithetical to Christianity in the Bible became the deception that spurred on a generation of cafeteria Christians who would cherry pick what they did and did not want to believe from their faith. Another very specific Gnostic New Thought tenet Oprah has spread widely on her show, which became a national phenomenon called The Secret, was the power of manifestation, also called the law of attraction. This is the assertion that positive or negative thoughts bring positive or negative experiences into a person's life. New Thought believes this happens through the vibrational frequency you send out into the universe. It's fitting that she invited Michael Beckwith, Reverend of the Association for Global New Thought, who was also an evolutionary leader on the show, to explain it. If you don't believe that this idea hasn't permeated our culture milieu, just think of how many times people have, quote, sent you good vibes.
We are vibrational beings. We're not just flesh and blood. If you put anything under a microscope, an intense microscope, you can ultimately see that everything is vibration. And as the scientists are not telling us, there's information there, but it's not solid. It's always moving. So we're vibrational beings. So as you were just saying, when we lift our vibration to what we want to experience, it happens first on a vibratory level. And then it shows up and manifests in our life. So people who are holding on to rancor, animosity, they're slowing down their vibration.
Okay, just had an aha there. You're actually, when you recognize your vibrational frequency, you're drawing into yourself all the time, literally, the vibration that is most like what you're putting out.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Yeah.
You cannot, another way of saying is you cannot have what you're not willing to become vibrationally.
Oh.
If you do get it, you'll lose it.
Oh.
You see, this is why people, they'll win the lottery and they lose everything,
Yeah.
or they'll finally get the person they think they want to be with.
Absolutely.
They can't keep the relationship, or they'll get a modicum of success but can't hold on to it because inside they weren't vibrationally aligned. They really hadn't become it. So you can temporarily manipulate and get things, but to have it completely, you have to lift your vibration and become that in vibration.
Oh, that's so good. You need to repeat it. That is so good. Isn't that look, hallelujah, hallelujah. That is so good.
You're not really attracting things to you. You're really radiating. It's really a radiation.
I could cry right now. I felt that so strongly. Yeah. That's going to resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, you're radiating it from within out. It's like if I become the vibrational frequency of love, harmony, peace, and I'm radiating that.
That's the key.
This theory of manifestation, of the power of your mind over your body, comes from that belief that you are in essence a mystical being trapped in a human body. The concept you heard Deepak Chopra refer to earlier, basically quoting the Reverend Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. This gives credence to another New Thought tenet that not only is all disease mental in origin or caused by our thoughts, but that you can actually heal your body with your mind using the science of mind or right thinking.
I want to talk about all the things that you say in this book. Let's start with, first of all, you say we're the only creatures on Earth who can change our biology by what we think and what we feel.
That's because we have a thinking body. Whenever you have a thought, you make a chemical that goes along with the thought, and there are receptors to these chemicals, not only in brain cells, but in all the cells of your body. So if you look at immune cells, for example, that help you fight against cancer and infection. Immune cells have receptors. They're listening. They're eavesdropping to your internal dialogue. Now, we are the only people who have a nervous system that knows this. And so by knowing this, by being aware of this, we can consciously change the chemistry of our body, because to think is to practice brain chemistry and body chemistry. Yeah, more than that. You produce immunomodulators like interleukins and interferons, which are powerful anti-cancer drugs. So if you're going on a joyride and you feel very joyful and you feel ebullient and you feel effervescent, your body is flooded with these chemicals that are very powerful anti-cancer drugs. If you had to buy them, it might cost you about $40,000 to do that. But you make millions of dollars of these when you do that.
So a lot of people find this to be very controversial because, you know, I have friends now who are suffering with cancer. And when you talk about this kind of thing, that your body, your mind creates whatever is going on in your body, that makes people feel like they have to blame themselves for the disease they created. But so are you saying that if you have disease, you have the disease because you somehow, because of every thought you've had, put it there?
See, it's much more complicated than that. We are participants in everything that happens in our life. To that extent, we have to take responsibility. Basically, it amounts to the toxicity in your life. Toxic environments, toxic food, toxic drinks, toxic relationships, toxic emotions.
Toxic relationship can make you sick.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So all these ultimately cause toxins in your body. So let's look at those factors that make you susceptible and those factors that make you resistant to this disease, cancer or whatever. And then we'll try and change those factors, and you and I will take a responsibility to do that.
So how is the New Thought religion correlated with the evolutionary leaders? Well, when the Coalition for One Voice in New York involved in all their movements, and Deepak Chopra's Alliance for a New Humanity and its movements formed to become the Evolutionary Leaders in 2006, they invited along Reverend Michael Beckwith and the Association for Global New Thought to join them. Together, through their various synergy circles they formed to influence all sectors, in particular at the United Nations through their Unit of Cluster and SDG Thought Leader Circle, they're guiding a future vision for humanity that seeks to destroy not only national sovereignty in favor of global governance, but personal sovereignty as well. You see, like their name suggests, a lot of the cosmological theories the evolutionaries hold about the world revolve around evolution. Many of you might be familiar with Darwin's theory of natural selection that believes that species evolve as their most robust genetic traits, the ones that help them survive their environment, are passed down to generations after them through reproduction. Genetics for traits that aren't good for survival are naturally selected out because the species that have those traits aren't able to survive and pass down their genetic traits. In other words, survival of the fittest. The evolutionaries believe that it's not survival of the fittest that made evolution to more complex species possible, but survival of the cooperative or group selection.
It's not that evolution didn't occur. Evolution occurred, but not according to the mechanism of Charles Darwin. The two fundamental characteristics of Darwinian theory, number one, hereditary changes or accidents or random mutation. But secondarily, and the most disastrous part of this theory that is just destroying the world, is the second part, which is called natural selection, which is based on a competition for survival. So it really says we emphasize the individual and that we don't care about the rest of it. If you win, you won the game, and it doesn't make a difference if all the other people are dying out there. If you're the winner, and that's just the nature of the game. So we bought into the fact that life is a struggle for survival. The hell with everybody else, take care of yourself. Finally, they're beginning to recognize it's the cooperation that drives evolution, not the competition. The competition has been destructive. We've proven that. Anything that encourages cooperation and community is the next step in our evolution. We either go ahead and move into the community, or as science has already told us, we are deep into the sixth mass extinction, and if we just play the game out, game's over.
Why does evolutionary leader Bruce Lipton believe that cooperation of a global community is the next step in our evolution? Listen to him explain in this next clip that the mechanism of cells grouping together to create communities of cells and the ability this gives them to form a larger membrane or biofilm around them to increase their intelligence was the process by which evolutionary leaps occurred.
The concept of trying to measure evolution through genetics is a total false misunderstanding. The whole thing was wrong, and that's not where evolution comes from. Organism A, we said, was a bacterium. I said, what does it do? It proliferates and makes a colony of bacteria. Then I say, what does that do? Well, that forms a biofilm where they all get together and control their world by putting a membrane around it. They evolve to a differentiated community, which is called the amoeba. Then I said, what did the amoeba do? So that starts to go together and goes to the next level, which becomes the human, which is a multicellular community. I said, well, we look at the spiral this way, and I go, that's really interesting, but if you look at the spiral from the side, it looks this way. Every rung of the spiral is a jump in an evolutionary awareness by the mechanism of community. Every turn of the spiral is the evolution of the individuals that ultimately create the community. So the first rung of the ladder was the bacterium. Then communities of bacteria came and formed amoebas. And then amoebas came together, and 50 trillion of them formed us. And guess what? We maximized in the 500 million years the conscious capability and mental capabilities of our nervous system. Then what when the human maximizes intelligence? Oh, it comes together in simple communities. Then it comes together in integrated communities. And then when it finally completes the next rung of the ladder, it organizes itself in a multicellular community called humanity. We are here at the turning point. Whether we decide as humans we want to make the superorganism called humanity, or we just want to let the thing die out, what we need is the awareness and consciousness and the massive intelligence that when you get 7 billion humans to come together in one organism, with that maximum intelligence, there's going to be an emergence of new consciousness, a new awareness of nothing that you can tell me today what's going to happen tomorrow.
Those of you who have studied Marx and Hegel and the dialectic may have right away recognized that spiral he was pointing to in this way of thinking about the world. The two opposing ideas they're trying to synthesize in this case are individualism versus collectivism. Every turn around the spiral is the evolution of the individual as they increase their conscious awareness that in order for them to survive as a species and make the next evolutionary leap, they must give up their free agency and join together in community. When they do this and then jump to the next rung of the evolutionary ladder as an evolved species, they then become a new individual organism and the cycle starts again. And this is why this cult's influence is significant to your life and why you might want to start paying attention to it, because they believe that the only way to save the human race from extinction and make the next evolutionary leap to transform society into a new higher species of human is to join together in global cooperation and community into a collective superorganism. We will, of course, like bacteria and amoebas have, to form a biofilm or membrane around us to increase our conscious awareness and group intelligence. This membrane is the internet.
Genes are controlled by environmental signals. Signals from the environment stick to the surface of the cell, the membrane. The membrane will then relay the signal into the proteins which control behavior. So the environment controls behavior via the membrane. So in truth, the brain of the cell is the membrane. And it's not anything to do with the genes. Well, why is that relevant? Because then I go back and I say you get to a simple bacterial-sized organism, and it's the smallest organism on the planet. It's the first organism on the planet. And the significance about it is this: they can only have a certain amount of membrane. So that meant evolution stopped. Why? If I'm going to make evolution by increasing membrane and I can't make any more membrane, then it stopped. Well, what happened next? I say, amoebas joined together in communities, put themselves in a bigger membrane, and that led to the evolution of the human cell. What we're seeing now is the breakdown of the structure, which is inevitably being connected by the global nervous system called the internet, which will hook 7 billion cells together to share their awareness, share their understanding of their superorganism character, and that we're moving into the next state. And it's completely not Darwinian at all. It's the complete opposite. What happens when 7 billion people come together? And the answer is, it's emergent. We don't know, but it'll be beyond anything you could ever imagine at this point. And we are on the threshold, but we're actually at the fork in the road.
If what Bruce Lipton is saying here about the behavior of genes being controlled and affected greatly through information received through its membrane is applied to what he said about the internet being our nervous system or membrane, then you can draw the logical conclusion that human behavior is being influenced through the knowledge or spiritual gnosis we receive via social media, algorithms, feedback loops, advertising, and the like. The internet is being used as a tool to increase our conscious awareness as individuals, to understand our identity and obligation to the group as co-creators of the universe, and essentially give up individualism in favor of collectivism. Not only that, but that membrane, the internet, is constantly collecting data about its cell, which is you. What do you think they're using that data for? Like any good cult would do, they're using that data to measure whether or not their hacking of your spirituality is successful, and if it's not, how they can market being a part of this collective world brain to you better. The scarier trajectory of this is if they're able to get their way and install their one world religion and merge it with the state. Eventually, this data might be used against you when it's connected to a social credit system using a digital ID. I know this is really dark and scary stuff, and with how long this cult has had a hold on our culture, it can seem too big and too influential to overcome. But I actually think that the revelation that what we're fighting here is a cult religion may be the information that we need to take this entire thing down. The Constitution is resoundingly clear about the separation between church and state. And the fact that New Thought has been deceptively installed as such in all these sectors of our society is a direct violation of our First Amendment rights. I'm not promising it's going to be easy, but if we put people in positions of power that have the political will and savvy to fight this, it may be a path out of this cultural chaos. I also think it informs our approach on those who oppose us, because those who we classify as woke, many of them are just brainwashed. I've been there before. I was in a religious cult for 7 years myself. If anything, it at least elicits a serious discussion on what the best approach is to deprogram these members of our society and protect other people from having their minds captured. Personally, I think more sunlight on the way this cult has sneakily duped and indoctrinated people over decades will wake people up to its evil intent. In future videos on this, I will show the role that the evolutionary leaders have played in the changes we're seeing in all the major sectors of our society. But I just wanted to show in this first one that the members of this cult are not considered a fringe group, and their ideas have had a huge leg up in society with the help of Oprah. From Deepak Chopra's best-selling books and his role in the ESG org Just Capital, to Barbara Marx Hubbard being nominated for vice presidency, to second-time presidential candidate Marianne Williamson, to Jean Houston's role as spiritual advisor to Hillary Clinton, to Bruce Lipton's participation in the Human Genome Project, to their sympathies dialogues with the Dalai Lama, to their major role at the recent Parliament of the World Religions, and their major NGO cluster at the UN, these people are in positions that are uncomfortably noteworthy. Why is it uncomfortable? Because whether you're religious or not, these people are coming for your religious freedom. And they're in positions at the UN and the Club of Rome and big business that allow them to have the influence to do so. Their goal is to fold all religions into this one world neo-communist religion and force everyone to adhere to it, whether that be through brainwashing, using social emotional learning and education, or by instituting a social credit system like they have in China to control our behavior. In order to do that, though, they need to take out their two biggest obstacles, Christianity and the Constitution, because that religion specifically and our country founded on that document value individualism and free will over collectivism. This is not a battle then over which religious worldview is better than the other, and I actually think this presents an opportunity for all religions and the non-religious to work together to protect the cognitive liberty to choose our own belief system that this cult is trying to take away from us. If you're not already, it might be time for you to start engaging with and getting others to unite in this very important fight. Thanks for sticking with me through this really tough material. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with as many people as you can. I'll see you next time.